Hey guys, Lowell at TechFix here, and I am in the TechFix Talk studio with
David Finch.
and we're going to talk about anything and everything. We don't have any sort of set precedents, but I do have some questions that I want to ask you because you and I have been in this industry, as you pointed out earlier, so kindly, you haven't been in this industry as long as I have, but we've been in it both a long time.
Yes.
So I want to know where you see two things. Where do you see technicians struggle the most? Number one. And the second question, and we'll probably get a little farther in this, is where do you see the gaps in our training, in our industry? And if you guys don't know how we do these podcasts, oftentimes, like for instance, we're having a conference, a technician training upstairs right now, and I just got off stage where I was talking about the gaps in the industry. And I have, as you guys know, 3 or 4 areas where I see technicians needing the most help. And I wanted to get your perspective on it, David. Where do you see that they need the most help?
I see, fundamentals. It seems that, a lot of guys seem to want to be advanced, but you can't be advanced unless you have basics, right? You need basic electricity. You need to know, you understand how the system works. And, I've always been a guy of, if you can understand how that system works as a whole, you can break it down into smaller parts. If you break it down into smaller parts, you can diagnose just that part. They're all inputs and outputs.
Sure. Could you maybe do a little bit deeper dive, like for example?
Sure. For example, easy example, a door switch. I've thought about this many times. A door switch in the mid-90s, you open the door and it switched the light on, right?
Uh-huh.
You progress to the late 90s.
I see you're trying to start with references I would understand. Okay.
Yeah. You get to the late 90s and you open the door and the door switch now tells a body control module to turn a light on or something of that nature. Mm-hmm. Now you get to the late 2010s and door switch, you open the door. Now we've added something. We've added, okay, now the fuel pump comes on when we open the door. Mm-hmm. It's priming the system. It's pre-warming the fuel, taking the fuel out of the rail that's warm, trying to cool the fuel. However we've come to that nature. You get to the mid-2015s and now you come to the door and you don't even have a key and the door switch is still there, but it unlocks the door. Now your fob unlocks the door. Mm-hmm. Fuel pump still comes on, but now you have this pretty screen that comes up and it's, surrounding you and it's afterglow lighting. And so we've progressed from a switch that just turned something on to now it's integrated into the whole system. So if that switch fails, it still has the same outcome. It's just a chain reaction.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when I was a kid, I do tell a lot of stories, don't I? When I was a kid, my friend's dad got a truck with Century mode. Do you remember what that was?
No.
So when you walked up to the truck, you could just pull on the door handle, even if it was locked or unlocked, all the lights would come on. It was called Century mode. Okay. So like I guess it was some sort of protection.
Okay, gotcha.
But yeah, so I remember that. I was like, oh, that's cool. So you're like, right there. You're speaking to me.
Speaking in the terms of the mid-90s, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that, you were talking earlier about things like how complex they've gotten. And, I agree with that to some degree. And I think we had this weird era, maybe 25 years, where things were very crudely electromechanical, I would say.
Right.
We were talking about thermostatic air cleaner, which most of you probably don't even know what that is, but it was a very crude way to heat up intake air using the convected temperature from the exhaust, and the systems rarely worked, and they were hard to diagnose and so on and so forth. A lot of vacuum switches and things like that. Whereas I see now, things have more commonality. The systems are more uniform as far as what I can see.
Right, and I see what you're saying because now, if you look on the diesel side, talk about diesels all the time, Bosch pretty much makes everybody's stuff. So if you look at, a DEF tank, it's pretty much the same DEF tank in a Ram as it is a Duramax, as it is, a semi-truck. It's just conformed to that chassis.
Yeah.
So it is becoming easier on that part.
So another area, I think, to drive my point home here is Most components have a source voltage, a feedback circuit, and then it has some sort of control circuit, right? Whereas it was like, there are these 9 different vacuum switches, and you have to get out there and vacuum test everything. And it was just more, it was more crude.
Right.
And I think that diagnostics or diagnosis in that case, sometimes if you didn't understand it, you'd have to really know that product to be very good at diagnosing common problems.
Right. And it goes down to, not referencing the door switch again, but when I was in college and learned things, it was an if and then statement, right? Early days of computer were if and then statements.
Yep.
If this happens, then, and then
I'm feeling so old.
There
right
you
now,
go.
bro.
Well, now instead of having one if statement and one then statement, we have an if statement with 20 thens.
Yeah.
So it's just a daisy chain. So if one small component goes bad, now you're going down the line and you got other issues. And I like to say, I have a case study. I like to say AI won't take our job because I have a case study where an electrical problem with a fuel pump, sets a code, but it also sets rail pressure codes. Well, that electrical problem with the fuel pump that's going to set the code immediately. That's a continuous monitor code, right?
Yeah.
So the computer should automatically see that and be like, well, we don't even need to look at rail pressure anymore because we have a low pressure pump problem. But we don't have that. We don't. It all integrates. So.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Why won't AI take our jobs because of that?
You won't see that because we have to think critically. We have to think of the whole system. And until we all learn to think of that whole system, until AI sees the whole system as one, which I just don't see that happening. I don't see that happening. Okay.
I kind of agree with you. I think that there's always going to have to be a human element somewhere in there to logically think and, do the mechanics. I mean, we'll have robots and that sort of thing. And I know that's what Elon is planning, but, to completely, I think they may not take our jobs and it may not be the next generation's jobs, but at some point, maybe, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I can see a robot walking up with an impact wrench and taking wheels off. I just don't see him walking up to a vehicle and, taking multiple components off to put a belt on. I mean, look what we have to do, put belts on now.
Yeah.
So, things like that, and that visual feedback that you need and the feel of your hands and doing things, it's kind of, we might be 100 years from that, right?
Yeah. If you fix the cars, you fix the shop.